Hey everybody, it's Marcia Dolgin, Fine Images and Camera Control Mastery, and I have a massive treat today. We're going to have a guest, and I am so thrilled to have this. This is somebody that I have admired for decades, and I remember when I was young, I actually took courses from this gentleman, and I still have some of his material, and I still use it. I just want you to know that's the truth.
Okay.
I do. So I wanted to introduce you to Fuzzy Duenkel, otherwise known as Alan, but he doesn't like people to know that. So Alan is an amazing photographer who was one of my, well, he doesn't know he was a mentor of mine, but he actually was. And I'm just going to go over here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. So Alan is a master craftsman photographer, and he has had numerous articles published in national magazines. His wife, Shirley, also earned a PPA craftsman degree, and he's been featured at hundreds of conventions and seminars in 43 states and in Canada. And I just want you to know that I have seen him multiple times at some of those seminars. So he's had numerous prints selected for the National Traveling Loan Collection at Epcot Center, exhibitions in Germany, Korea, and the International Hall of Fame in the museum in Oklahoma. He's a four-time Director Award winner. He's a three-time Wisconsin Professional Photographers of America Photographer of the Year. He's a 14-time Wisconsin Senior Photographer of the Year, a three-time Photographer of the Year for the Southeastern Wisconsin Professional Photographers of America, and a five-time Senior Photographer International Photographer of the Year, SPA Artist of the Year, Wisconsin PPA Hall of Fame recipient, and it just goes on. But the thing that
This
makes
guy must be
most,
good.
what he finds that fills him with the most pride and gets the most rewarding part of his craft is making portraits to become cherished family heirlooms for his clients, for his friends, and for the world. So, without ado, I got to come back over here quickly. Where are we? There we are. Here's Fuzzy. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for that wonderful introduction.
All right. So I wanted to just ask you a couple of questions because I am consider me a student. Okay, we'll just consider. What I'd like to know is, what do you think photographers are doing that is harming our future value as photographers?
This is a tough topic to start off with because it's kind of negative, and some people may take offense at it, but just keep an open mind for a minute. There are some things that we're doing that are devaluing what we do for people. One of those is giving away a lot of beautiful work for free. And I do freebies, you know, when I need to test something or for whatever reason, if I need to get some kind of market going, some kind of genre going. But I'm seeing a lot of work out there that's just gorgeous, just to die for type of images, and should be large wall portraits. And then when you ask the photographer, you know, what did the client buy, they said, oh, it was just a fun thing we did, and we just gave them files. And again, I do some of that, but I'm just seeing way too much of that. And images that I'm seeing that are so good 20, 30 years ago would have just knocked people over, and they would have had to have 30 by 40s on the wall. But now we're just giving it away for free. So we need to be aware of that. The other thing is, and this is the part that's going to make people mad, is composites where we're putting people in places they never were. That sort of thing bothers me because it essentially it makes what we do a cheap computer trick. I'm seeing a lot of it, and you know, there's no fighting it. I can't keep my thumb in the dye, but I just choose not to participate in it because when you put a person in a digital scene that was purchased from somewhere else, sure, they may think it's cute and all of that, but what does it do to our profession in the long run? It takes it away from being an experience to being, here, just photograph you here, and I'll drop you into a different scene. And then it just becomes, as I say, a cheap computer trick. Think of the movies that we've watched years ago. Some classic Hollywood movies of these biblical type of things where they used thousands of movie extras. Well, nowadays we just drop digital people in, and we're not impressed with that anymore. We're not impressed with special effects, CGI. We go to a movie and we should be astounded at what we're seeing, but it's just run-of-the-mill average stuff because we see it every day. And I think that's what we're doing to our own profession. And I just hate to see that. So photograph people on location. Now, Fuzzy, what if they don't have a great location? That's where the challenge comes in, and that's what I do. I try to make something out of nothing. We can do it. Not every session is going to be a winner, a home run. But those who do get the home run, they get something special. Those that aren't as good, they'll just be just as happy with you making something better than they see every day. And I'll be discussing that sort of thing during the program.
I totally agree with you. And I think that a lot of that, it even goes to the point of retouching, to the point of people not looking like humans any longer. There's a lot to be said about problem solving. And I think that the quick fix is going to come back and bite us. I totally agree with you. I have another question for you. What do new photographers need to learn to help them have a solid future?
I think a lot of photographers these days are just, as I'll mention in my program, just pointing a camera at people. They're not really controlling the light. They're not really doing anything other than, as I say, just pointing a camera at them. Now, a lot of that is education. Eventually, when they get to understand how to work with natural light, they'll know that they can't shoot in this location at that time of the day. But when you become a more well-rounded photographer, you can control that lighting and work at just about any place, anytime. So that's what they need to learn is, again, when I started 20, 30, 40 years ago, we learned the craft. We learned how to light people. We learned all the techniques, and so that we could come away with an image anytime, any session. So I think learning how to work with lighting rather than just getting likes on Facebook. We need to get beyond that to make something more attractive for people. And again, I'll cover that in the program.
Perfect. So I have so many things I could jump in and say, but I want to hear what you have to say. So what lighting skills should new photographers know that they don't know now?
And that's a subset of the previous question. Subtractive lighting, I don't really get into that in this program that much, but both subtractive and additive lighting. Again, not just going off and winging it and finding a cool location, a cool alley or a wall or some pretty spot, but rather learning how to control the lighting so that it is coming at the face in the proper direction.
I totally agree. And again, I think it comes with a combination of experience and having the guts to go out there and just really do it, and then taking that information and making it into problem solving, which becomes a whole other creative level, which can be in itself a really excellent PowerPoint or a strength for any photographer. So I know that you have brought us a fabulous slideshow, and I am dying to see it. What I'd love for you to do is share your screen and give us a little show.
Okay, let's get to that. Let's see, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see what I need to do. And so let's get off here. It'll just take a second. Okay, now I'm going to be looking to my left because that's where my main monitor is. So sorry if I'm not looking at you, at the viewers. But the whole point of the program that I wanted to talk about was to not just take pictures, but make pictures. And anyone can just grab a camera or cell phone and point it at people and call it a portrait. But the problem with that is anyone can do it. So why would anyone pay us to do anything beyond that? So what we need to do is to learn how to see what's there but may not be obvious right away. And so, for example, when I go into a home and start working around their home, I'll start off with something simple and obvious just to get something under my belt. But after that, then I'm looking around for different areas that people may not have thought of that would work for a great portrait. And I'll cover some of that later. But again, it's really important not to just point a camera at people. I'm seeing a lot of that on social media where I'm thinking, man, oh man, the lighting is bad. The location's interesting, but they have no clue, no concept of lighting and of flattering lighting. So we need to worry to learn that. I'm just going to share a few befores and afters now. I grabbed the befores from their Facebook pages, and they gave me permission to do this, so we're okay with it. But just, you know, what they look like, but then what we did with them. And some I worked with additive lighting, some subtractive lighting, and some mixture of both, along with some Photoshop enhancements and so on. But just to give you an idea of some of these different images. The one on the left is what she actually used for her senior portrait, and I saw that and I thought, oh man, I knew this girl, and I said, let me just do some fun photographs for you. So we got her out and we just played a little bit. And yes, the hair coming across the face was intentional. I liked it, so I left it. I certainly could retouch that out, but I chose not to. This is a senior we did, and just grabbed one of her Facebook pictures and just showing you, you know, what we do. And this may seem a little bit unfair, you know, grabbing a snapshot, but really, you know, this is what we're challenged with. We're challenged with making people look as good as they do in their minds, and certainly better than anyone else can do. The one on the left is a school picture she had, and the one on the right is one I did during her photo session. Now this is I think a good progression of what I do. The one in the upper left is just a pose that I thought could work for her. She was a little heavier, so we had her lean forward, and we set up the lighting. And then I thought, well, let's try some without glasses. And so we did that because she doesn't always wear glasses. I asked them if they always wear them. They said, oh, no, we can take it off. So fine, we did that. And then I thought, well, let's change to a vertical composition. So now on the lower left, we did that. We also flipped her hair, which I tend to do somewhat, maybe a little bit overdoing it, but I liked it. Then I moved the light from from our left, or excuse me, from our right to her left, our right to our left for the middle bottom image. Now we're very close. So then, as you see from the middle bottom to the bottom right, there are only subtle differences, but differences that make all the difference in the world. I floofed her hair a little bit in Photoshop. I just kind of puffed it up a little bit where it needed to be. I changed the color of the top. And then I added some of the enhancements in the background. Now, some people say, well, I don't want to be over photoshopped. And I don't think she was. Look at the middle bottom and the middle right, and there's really not much Photoshop done. Sometimes we get a question about the outfit, changing the outfit color. Do people mind doing that? Absolutely not. They don't care. They want what looks good. So they accept my judgment on that. I think a lot of times on social media, photographers will see a beautiful portrait and say, oh, that's so pretty. But then I want to ask them, what's pretty about that portrait? Is it the face that's pretty, or is it what the photographer did that's pretty? And for a close-up, a headshot, of course, the face is the story. That has to be great to make the portrait a successful portrait, if that's the point of the image, just a tight close-up. But what I try to do is to make images that are great no matter who's in it. I learned a long time ago from a lady, Cindy Baxter. She is a portrait photographer out in, I think, West Virginia or somewhere. And she makes these gorgeous backgrounds. And she said it's an 80, it scores an 80 of PPA score alone without a person in it. So when you drop a person in it, you've automatically got a gorgeous portrait. So I kind of learned from that. So I try to make images that are good regardless of the person in it. So I just blurred out the faces on these images to show that what we need to do is just go beyond a pretty face. And what makes a great photograph is more to it. Same thing when we competed in folio competition. I learned that every single image in that folio has to be like an 80 or above to make it a successful folio. Because if there's one bad image, it pulls the whole thing down. Likewise, we're responsible for every image, for every inch in that image. So all of it has to be good. I think this is a beautiful photograph regardless of the subject, as you can see. The flowers are just a natural. That's easy to work with. So it doesn't matter if she's an attractive person or not, which she is, but then we make the rest of the photograph that much more interesting. Eyes, of course, too. Here I went with more angles because he's a guy rather than going with soft curves, but we made the photograph a success regardless of the person's face. So now we're going to get into some lighting. Were there any questions, Marcia, that I should cover that I haven't?
No, I'm sitting here absolutely agreeing with everything you're saying and nodding like a silly person. No, you're doing great.
Okay.
I don't want to interrupt.
Okay. All right, you're good. Just feel free to do that if you want to. The image on the left is an example of, again, just pointing a camera at people. And while you could Photoshop that, you could Photoshop the heck out of it to make it decent. That's not really the way to go about doing what we do. It's much better to make better lighting so that all the photographs we do in that location are fixed. Otherwise, if we have to fix an image to make it decent, well, now we've got to fix every other image in that spot. So we try to make the lighting good first and then go with the posing and let the spontaneity happen. This is 2 lights. And here we go. I'm showing that here. It's an off-camera flash, TTL flash, as the main light, and then I used an LED light as the accent light. I use all kinds of lighting. Here, this is a simple, a natural light, if you will, image. The one on the left is just trying to get a decent exposure on her face, but obviously that's not acceptable as a portrait. All I did was bounced my speed light off the ceiling behind me to my right, and we got a beautiful photograph that way. Simple. It's just on-camera light, but pointed the other way. So it couldn't get any easier. It's all TTL. I shoot primarily TTL flash and auto exposure, aperture exposure camera on my camera. So I just push. Yes.
Tell me again what you're doing when you're shooting this kind of thing. You're using auto exposure, TTL.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I shoot Canon. It's an aperture value, or AV. Nikon, it's I forgot the names of it, but anyway, just aperture value. So the aperture stays constant, and then flash is almost always in TTL because it nails it a lot easier and faster than I can get there with manual. And so it's just point and shoot all day long. If I need to make an adjustment, I do, but it's rare that it needs to be adjusted very much, if at all.
That's really great. Now, when you're doing other kinds of work, are you using manual at all?
Rarely. I do when I'm in a situation where I expect that the flash will not understand it or the camera won't understand what I'm getting at. Let's say that I'm pointing the camera at a sunset, and I want to keep it constant because I don't want it to change much. I want my sunset to be a certain density. The camera may not know the density that I want, or if the sunlight is in the image. Like, for example, if I moved away here, this thing right up here, that's a light bulb. It's not on right now. But if that were on, it would be messing with the exposure of the image. So same thing with the TTL flash. If you've got sunlight in the photograph, it's going to say, I don't need a lot of light. It's already bright. So things like that. Then I'll switch to manual. But otherwise, mostly TTL. And people ask, well, what about the consistency? It's very consistent. And that's because I work with images that are of the same key. I don't have something that's really bright along with a dark subject, or I don't work with a bright subject in a dark setting very often. I try to keep everything monotone, and then it's easy as pie for the flash to figure out.
So the bottom line in this is, just so everyone knows, this guy knows his material. He knows his range. He knows his equipment, and he knows what he can do in the various workflows that he has for aperture priority or manual or whatever he chooses. You got to understand, knowing your background, having the background in your technical aspect of knowing your camera and knowing your lights is really important, so that he has the flexibility and can use what the camera has to offer. So just keep that in mind.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. And it comes a lot easier. I mean, when I started with film, you know, it would be 2 weeks before you'd see the proofs. Well, now you can see the results right away. So people learn a lot faster these days than ever before. And
Yeah.
you've got YouTube and all the other resources available to you. So this is an image that is obviously too dark. And we might want to just lighten the exposure to change that problem. So let's do that. Okay, we did that, and now it's okay, but there's really no definition or there's no direction of light on the face. But again, it's not bad. It would be acceptable. But I think there's a better way, just by using a TTL flash softbox off to my right. Now we've got density on her face. We've got direction of light on her face. We've got the background window of the density that I wanted, which is about a stop or so overexposed to make it look nice and bright outside, so that the whole thing is in the same key. Now look at this. There's anything super dark or super light about it. It's all in the same pastel key. So the flash, I just put it on TTL and it just works. I'm using Canon speedlights. Yeah, but these days Godox is really the main go-to brand. Everyone uses Godox, and that's because you have more upward mobility with Godox. You can go from a speedlight to a 600 watt second flash. Canon doesn't have that, so I'm still using the Canon 600s because that's all I need. I work in the evening, so I don't need a high power flash anyway. Let's talk just a little bit about natural light versus a flash. And I think a photographer needs to be well-rounded to understand all aspects of lighting. And so I'll use natural light, I'll use flash, I'll use LED, I'll use subtractive, I'll use reflectors, whatever it takes. And that's what being a photographer is. It's fine to have a niche or have a specialty, but then you narrow your range. And while it may work for you now, it may not work in the future. For example, when I started, I called my business Duenkel Wedding Photography. Well, guess what? When I wanted to branch into portraits, now I'm stuck with that name. So I had to change the name, went through an expensive process of doing that. So if we name our business, bellies, buttons, and butterflies, we're going to limit ourselves to just doing, babies or whatever that is. So it's really better to come up with a name and that's going to work for you down the road. And trust me, we've all been there where we think we're going to start off just doing one thing, and we want to branch off into other fields. So here, I'm just going to run through just a few images that were done with natural light. This is done, now there's some Photoshop to this one, but I love this image, but that was just all the natural light that was there. The same girl, and again, soft light, soft sunset type of light. This was a great natural light situation where we had a lot of subtractive lighting going on, so that all that was left was light coming from various directions, smaller patches of light, creating the look of flash, but that was all natural light. Knowing where to find that, it helps. This is just a very even, soft light of her out in the field, again, later in the day. On this one, I subtracted a little bit of the light above and to our right, to create a direction, or what you call it, modeling on the face. Sunset again. Inside her home, using her window light just as the main light. And then the accent light on her face was provided by another window. Now a touch on flash. And the same girl, we're using the same girl. And if they've got a figure like this, man, we've got to show it. But anyway, this is flash off to my left. Very subtle flash, and that's what I like about TTL flash, is it determines what you need, and it gives you just what you need. If you need a lot, it'll give you a lot. If you need just a wink of it, if the light's already decent, it'll just give you a little bit of light because that's all you needed. So that's why I love TTL flash. And I started with TTL flash probably about 20 years ago. What's that?
The TTL is off camera?
Yes. Yeah. Most of the time I have it on a light stand and a softbox.
Right.
So we've got the softbox off to our right. Now this is an example where I may have chosen to go with manual shutter speed, because I wanted to be able to control the density of the background. If I had it on aperture preferred automation, it may have given me a little bit lighter background than I wanted, but I wanted a little deeper saturation in the background. You can do that with compensation too. It's easy enough on the Canons. You just dial it down.
Right.
Here too, we needed to have the camera on manual, I think, because it was fairly bright in the background. But again, off-camera flash, almost always TTL. And if the TTL doesn't work, there's compensation. And if that doesn't work, then you can go manual. But it's much faster just to stick with TTL and only change it when it needs to, because then you don't have to worry about positioning the flash. You don't have to remeter it every time or chimp every time you move it. It compensates. This was flash because there was not enough light on her face. Otherwise, again, this is that example that I was talking about where we had sunlight in the picture and it would not know how much light to give it. So I did have to go manual on this, manual flash. An LED light in her garage. And finally, in our studio, this is a studio flash. I don't do much studio work, but anyway, that was done with a butterfly or clamshell type of lighting in the studio. I'll take a break here. Any questions before I continue?
No, I was just fascinated that you're using the aperture priority for a lot of these photographs. That's a big wake up call.
Yeah, I use auto ISO when I'm hand holding the camera because I don't want the shutter speed to drop below a certain point. So I'll let the ISO float, and yeah, sometimes it gets noisy, especially later in the evening with smaller apertures. But generally, I'm shooting aperture preferred. Now, I wanted to relate a story about that. In the 70s, I had a camera. It was a Minolta manual exposure camera. A friend of mine had a Konica, which I think was the first auto exposure camera. And I said, well, I don't know if I would trust that automatic exposure. And he said, well, how are you metering? And I said, well, I do what the in-camera meter tells me to do. I set the f-stop or the shutter speed corresponding to that. And he said, well, that's what my camera does, only a lot faster. So I thought, why am I wasting all this time setting my settings when I'm just doing what the camera told me to do? So that's why I've gone automatic. And obviously there are some times when it just doesn't work, but those are minimal. Those are minor. Those are very few compared to the times that it will work. So I'm just guessing maybe 90-95% of the time I'm shooting automatic and it just works.
So my comment would be in terms of this would be from a student's point of view is, hey, look, you got to know the range. You got to know the camera can only get 5 stops, and you got to know the range and how to compress or expand those 5 stops to get that image that you see in your mind's eye. So it's not, so when you know that, like you set up a lot of your sessions at twilight or sunset or near dusk or whatever, the kinds of things that you go look for are controlled situations. Things that you're looking for generally are controlled situations where the range is what did you give it a different name? But the range of light, the brightness to darkness is
dynamic range or
no,
that's different. That's a different term. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a term for a sensor or a camera, but yeah.
The point is,
and I learned that years ago. I accepted a portrait at high noon, and they said that's the only time we can be available. And I said, oh, really? We should do this at sunset or near sunset, or the sweet light time. And nope, we can't get off, and we can't all get together. It was a family portrait, so I did the portrait at noon. I did the best I could. I put them under a tree and all kinds of things to avoid the sunlight problem. They hated it. They said, you should have taken the bull by the horns and forced us to do it at the right time. Oh my gosh. So ever since then, I just refused to put myself behind the 8 ball right from the start. I won't do a portrait unless I'm guaranteed a good outcome. So I just choose to work toward the evening. Now, I understand that if you've got a volume operation, you've got more mouths to feed, you have to work during the day, and that's fine. Well, then you just need to have structures or places to work that you can work on a bright, sunny day that give you that option.
Right.
All right. So now sometimes we're asked about my photographs seem to have a consistent richness in the skin color, and there's a lot to that. But basically it's this. We do the makeup. My wife has been helping girls with their makeup forever. And the lighting is a strong part of it. And then we go into raw capture and adjust the color. And then the final touch is retouching. So here's just a progression of one example of that. We started off with this, was just using window light just to photograph what she looked like. And then we corrected the color because the other image was too blue. It was probably north light, which is blue. So, or if it's on a blue, a sunny day. And so we corrected that color. Then we did the makeup, and then we did the retouching. So that's the progression from the beginning to the end. And so that's, why the photographs look the way they do. Take away any of those steps, and it won't work. Here are just some examples of some befores and afters we did that just show the makeup, no Photoshop.
Yeah.
We're all aware of, the power of makeup, but it just wouldn't be possible otherwise. I think this last one was probably the most dramatic. Hardly looks like the same person, but that's what we do. And then beyond that, sometimes the styling that we do, this is a senior that we did, is a typical head and shoulders yearbook type photograph, but I thought, what happens if you flip your hair? And I love the 80s. I love big hair and all that stuff. But anyway, so we just tried that, and I thought, what a difference, and it works because their hair isn't accustomed to doing that. So it adds a little bit of volume, especially if you go opposite of the part, then it works the best. I'll just show another.
That's amazing. That's just amazing.
Yeah. And it was fun to do for this girl because she's more of a nerdy type girl, if that's okay to say. I mean, she's into math and science and, not Odyssey of the Mind, but robotics or whatever, all of these things that these kids are into that take some brain power. So it was fun to do something glamorous for her.
How did she respond?
Loved it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And just another hair flip, going opposite of the normal hair part. So now we're going to get into some fun things, and this is kind of what I do for every portrait. When I go to the home, if they have a nice area, certainly I'll use it, but the homes I work in are typically not always that nice, so I have to work a little harder at it, and those are the most fun because eventually we do find something that's going to work. Yeah, this is those are Tootsie Rolls and dirt cake, I think. Anyway, so this background was a U-Haul trailer or whatever you call these, a horse trailer.
Wow.
So this background is an interesting one. It's actually a raft that was in that shed.
Smart.
And I have a program, or I have a little slide program, a manually advanced slide program that we go through for our seniors when they come in for a consultation. Everyone I photograph has a consultation. So they came over and we talked a little bit about this, and I said, this is what I look for, because trust me, very few people think that they'll have a great place for me to work. So so I have to assure them that no problem, we can make it work. This was she was in front of a grill cover.
Yep.
And this one too, we have interesting colored background, but they were trash cans.
I love this.
This one was this one was in her garage, and she was in front of soda cans. So we can make it work.
Yes, aperture priority.
Yeah. And P or program mode can work too, but then your aperture will change. And I pretty much don't care what the shutter speed is. The camera's almost always on a tripod anyway.
Okay.
And so the shutter speed doesn't really matter until it gets really low and there might be some movement. But the aperture is mostly what I'm concerned about. So that's why I usually prefer aperture first.
Right.
This guy doesn't really matter where he is, but he's actually standing on his septic system. But the other one was an infrared camera, by the way. So those are fun to work with. And this is in a very ordinary spot in her yard. It was right down there at the corner of, at the end of the road. And we as photographers, we understand that. We use telephoto lenses and we can eliminate everything that we don't want to have in there.
That's right.
This next girl is going to be in the center of those weeds. She'll be standing there, and then I think I used a 200 f2 for this one.
Yeah.
In their shed, they had this, I think it's some kind of a refrigerator or something. And that was a good background to use to put her against.
Wow.
This is a place that's about a mile from my house. I use this once a year, and I prefer not to go to someplace more than once a year because I just don't want to get stale. If I start going there, I start repeating myself and losing interest. So I'll just keep myself to just doing this once a year. But I'll just run through some photographs that were done at a location like this.
And these are all natural light?
I think all of these were, yes. I think I subtracted light above her and used a reflector below on this one. This one was, I think it was a reflector off to my left. This was like 20, 30 years ago. But I'm just showing, using this, the last photograph you saw was done last year. So, but this is how it looked over the years. Just showing the same location, photographed different ways. This is a painted effect using a Corel painter. This was this time zero SX70 type of image, and that was fun to do. But these days we've got Photoshop, so we can do it else. But it was just a lot of fun to do manually right on the print. Painting with light is another technique that we can use to enhance our subjects. And I did this last year. A guy had a tractor that he wanted to be photographed with. So I put the camera on a tripod and did several different flash exposures. Now, painting with light is generally done with continuous light when it's pitch dark. But when I'm photographing seniors, I don't normally want to work that late at night. So I'll use flash painting sometimes. So anyway, this is how we did. We just did several exposures around the tractor with the camera on a tripod, and then combined them in Photoshop. So this is what it looked like before, with just one single exposure, and then with several different flash exposures. I don't know how many layers this was, maybe 10 or 12 layers of different flash exposures. And I think the impact difference is quite dramatic. So here it is again with the single exposure, and then once again with the different flash exposures. It's all one flash, but it looks like it could have been lit with 10 different lights.
Is one flash?
Same thing with it. Yeah, one speed light. And then using a flash painting, again with several different exposures. I'm just guessing, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably about 7 or 8 different exposures on this one, all combined together in the lighten mode, so that only the bright areas combine. Now this one I did do at night. I did this with continuous light. This was a senior's, that last one was a senior's car, and this is a senior's car also.
Wow.
I have a little story to tell about this one though. Then I added her, the senior, in the photograph. And yeah, they had a really nice home, nice car. And I'm out there, and it was super windy that evening. And I had my light on, on softbox on a light stand, but I use a tripod as a light stand. So I had the lights spread way apart because it was so windy. And I didn't want it to fall onto her car, but it did. But luckily I was using a softbox that didn't cause any scratches. I use like a Lastolite type of box. Chinese knockoffs are similar, and it just pretty much just bounces off of it. It didn't scratch, thank goodness.
Oh my gosh. You did that. So that's all continuous light, including the house?
Yeah, I used spotlight on the house, several different exposures. This may have been, 30 or 40 different exposures, all combined. And I photographed the sunset at evening, then I have to wait around for it to get pitch dark, because with continuous light, you can't have any light. It's got to be total darkness. So that's how I did that. John Hartman is the one to learn that technique from.
Right.
He's a master at that. And then combining light and Photoshop. Now we'll talk about some of the things we do after we photograph someone, because while we did makeup on this image, she needed more. And then also a little bit, she needed a little bit more help with Photoshop. So we start here, and then I poofed her hair up in Photoshop again because I love the 80s. I like big hair. I like any hair, actually, come to think. But anyway, so she just needed a little height to her hair, and then let's see, did I do anything else with the hair? Yeah, just pretty much just that. And then I added a little makeup in Portrait Professional. I use Imagenomics Portraiture for retouching, but Portrait Professional does a nice job on the makeup.
It does. It does. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Sometimes it works well. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you just have to try it.
Well,
this was during a seminar we were doing.
Makeup aspect of it, or even the reshaping of the face. You have to just control the sliders really carefully on that.
Right. Yeah, I don't generally use Sculpt. I mean, I might use it once a year, if at all. But I'm not afraid to liquefy people. I'll do whatever I think is appropriate for the situation, whether it's to correct a mistake I made in posing, or just to give them a little help. I'm not opposed to that at all. But it has to be done within reason, and you can't show them a before and after, because that would crush their ego. So we don't want to do that. But I'm all for whatever helps them feel good about themselves.
Right.
Especially in those teenage years. So here we are at a little seminar, and I'm shooting up because that's the angle I wanted. And so we started with this. This is the image we got, but this is an image that, again, we did all we could with the lighting, and then but we needed to help. It needed a little help in Photoshop. So we used some Nik tonal contrast and also some Lucis art. Those two combined to give a more dramatic, gritty feeling. And then we'll just go through some various typical Photoshop things, just the befores and afters with Photoshop retouching. And as I said, I'll usually use Imagenomics Portraiture to put the final touch on smoothing the skin. I'll take out the big problems to begin with, and then let that finish up. Did a little high key vignette on this one as well, along with some diffusion. I don't do diffusion a lot, but once in a while it's fun to do. This one we went with either bleach bypass or tonal contrast, and then shifted the image because it was a little tilted because I accidentally had the camera too low, or maybe I needed the camera to be in that position, and then just dealt with the perspective problem after that. Just going with whatever technique seemed to feel right for that image. This one had more of a Western flavor, so I finished it off like that. I like this image, but I didn't like the color of her dress, and it didn't really go with the flowers. So then I added more flowers behind her, and then changed the color of her dress to go with it. And again, people, they don't care. They like it. If it looks better, they'll buy it.
Yeah.
I like this image, but I didn't like the fire logo in the material behind them. So we took that out. Just showing some befores and afters. And this, I thought, this was a very interesting situation. This is another example where the girl needed some height to her hair. So I just poofed it up. And that was pretty much all I did. I did add a little vignette on the image with a color. I just sampled in Photoshop. And then the retouching, there wasn't really much to be done there. And the mom cried when she saw this. And I thought, oh my gosh, the power of what we can do. She just couldn't believe that was her daughter. So that's great when you get that reaction. And then Painter, there are different tools to do this. You can use Corel Painter. This one is also done with Painter. But these days I use Topaz Impression. It does it a lot faster because Corel Painter is a very hands-on process. You have to do every inch of the image, and Topaz Impression can do this in almost one click, but it does have some sliders to control it with.
Photoshop has some stuff that does that too.
I'll need education on that. I think is it the history what do they call that? Something history brush or the blending brush or?
No. It's a filter. And you can. It's one of the filters. I think it's watercolor. You can pick which other filter you want.
Really?
But you can do it. And what I would do is, I'll tell you later. But I would do it in layers.
Okay.
and it does a fabulous job, and it's very quick, and you have tremendous control over it. I've done, and
Okay.
I've
Well, I'm
sold
just
a lot of those.
okay.
Are you masking when you're doing these, by the way?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'll mask it off the face. Like here for this guy, it would have messed with his face too much. So I blend a little bit of it back in.
Yeah.
And there's some other tools in Topaz Impression, like you can make the brush smaller and then do that in different layers.
Yeah.
And and this is something that we're getting to another aspect of. Well, let's just cover this first. This is something a name I came up with. It's an artistic interpretation. So I call it art interpretation, and that's a product where I'm just given the freedom to do whatever I want. And I learned this from Nikki Harrison, a tremendous portrait artist in Canada. And she's way better at this than I am. But basically, just kind of going out there on a limb and just trying different things that you normally wouldn't do. I normally would not have colored the sky pink, but I sampled the color on her outfit and then did that. Gave her a little height to the hair and did some other things. This is another example of a technique I kind of got from her. Just going with it and just playing with the image. And this is Photoshop to the extreme, but I love the effect.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
And this is where we started. That was the location. This is the image we started with, and that's what we finished with. And so sometimes it's fun just to really take it to this kind of extreme. And yes, they did go with the wall portrait of this. This is an image I showed earlier. This is the before. This is the way it looked, and then after I fixed it with all the techniques that Nikki has that helped me out. Another one that was inspired by Nikki. What I did was I stretched her skirt on the next photograph to make her look a little taller, and so I didn't really liquefy her per se as much. But mostly just stretching that bottom skirt.
Oh yeah,
make her
that really helps.
more statuesque. Yeah, and then adding some color in there, the purple color again. I don't know why I chose purple. It just seemed like that's what it needed. This is a wonderful example. This is a girl we photographed this last year, her senior portrait, and I love that dress. I just really loved it. And this is the only image I got with a pink gel on the hair. I had it right behind her. And after I shot this one, I thought, that's really stupid. I don't want to do that. I don't always get it. But then later on, I thought, maybe there's something in there. So then I really worked on the image and got that. Now that took me at least a day to work on. And I didn't really do anything to her face other than use Portrait Pro on her face for the makeup.
Nice.
and the lighting. I really didn't do anything. It looks like it was massively retouched or whatever, but it was mostly Portrait Pro lighting and makeup, and that did a wonderful job there. But the rest was done all in Photoshop. I started sampling the image. I sampled her dress, and I got pink. So then I just kind of dabbled all over the place with that pink, and along with some other Photoshop techniques. But I just love that result. And this is now a 36-inch metal in our office on display. They went with a wall portrait of it, and her grandma had to come over just to see it here on display in our studio. And it was kind of neat because we photographed her sisters, her two previous sisters, senior portraits. And this girl didn't, she wasn't athletic, and she wasn't really the achiever that the other sisters were. But now she's got something that's even better than theirs. And that's what the grandma said. I'm not saying that. That's what the grandma said. This gets to the question that we had talked about earlier. So did you want to get into that, Marcia? About what is the under-photographed?
Yeah, the question is, what do you feel is an under-photographed portrait market that needs to be filled?
Well, this is one. This is my wife. I think she was 60-something when we did this, and anyway, she was getting her hair cut, and I said, well, before you get it cut, let me just photograph you with your hair. And she said, well, I don't have to go through the makeup and everything. Don't worry about that. Your face won't show. So we went outside. We wrapped her in some gauze or some netting, and it was a really nice a fall day with the colors popping. So we did that, And I photographed it as is, but knowing that I could do something with it. I didn't know what I would do with it. A lot of times I don't know. We just kind of go with it and just see where it leads us. But this is what I ended up doing with it. And so this is a combination of color sampling and painting in normal mode, but mostly topaz impression. One of the filters, I don't know which one it was, one of the painting techniques. And then I made it more golden and rich. And when she saw this, she gasped. And I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, Shirley knows what I do. She's, you know,
Yes.
so, and for her to be impressed, I thought was really important. And that, and she said, that's exactly how I felt when we photographed it. So I thought, man, we've got something here. I think there's a market here that of the 30 to 50-year-old women who feel that they've still got it, but they just need someone to capture it for them. And you know, what woman of that age or that maturity, you know, wouldn't love to have a wall portrait like this on their walls? So I think that's a market that needs to be gone after. I just feel that there's a big untapped market there. Along with this, there are several other areas that I think are also under photographed, and that would be, you know, older people. Now, there's a long story behind this photograph. This is Darton Drake on the left. He's a friend of mine. Yeah, and this is his mom, and he just loved his mom, and she's in a nursing home at this point, and that's where we did this session. But after doing this session, it occurred to me that, you know, there's potential there. Now, I'd rather photograph pretty 17-year-old girls. Okay, so I'm just being upfront. I'm a shallow guy. You know, I just didn't really enjoy the process of photographing older people that much. But I do recognize that there's a potential there for something, for creating or capturing something that will be priceless for people and for generations to come. So that's something to be aware of. Well, that previous photograph, the mom on the left saw that and said, I'd like something like that with my mom, but not so dark and moody. So we went for a little happier look. But this was done in in the nursing home, in this room. That's her room in the nursing home. So I just brought a background along and used window light behind me, and we just went with it. I'll just show you the photograph again, so you can do that sort of thing anywhere.
Love that.
Great. Yeah, and she's about 100 years old.
Wow.
And this is a photographer and his wife, but again, this type of portrait, I think, you know, just because we're old on the outside doesn't mean we're old on the inside, and you know, that we don't have that feeling anymore. Another just basically a snapshot, but we can make something important. This lady's 108, and so I had to photograph her. She's a couple of miles from my house, and I said, "Oh, Clara, you just got to let me photograph you." So we went over there and did that for her. But these are the kind of photographs that mean a lot to the relatives that are still with us, and she still is with us. But this is my aunt. She's an author, so I wanted to photograph her with her books. So again, this market, I think, is largely ignored, and untapped. This is my dad back. I did this in 1999, I think, and so I photographed him in my studio. I wanted him to be photographed by Millie Totoshek, and I don't know if anyone knew her or knows her, but she was a wonderful photographer who did old guys. She just did a wonderful job with old guys. So I wanted her to photograph, and well, you know, one thing led to another. It never happened. And finally, my wife said, "Sure, Fuzzy, you better photograph him before it's too late." So I did, and I photographed him in my studio, and I'm glad I did, because that photograph means a lot more to me than had Millie done it.
Right.
A fellow I photographed. I play tennis with this guy, and he's such an interesting character. But I did a family portrait for him, and then while we were doing that, I said, "Rick, you got to let me photograph you." So we did this of him, and this will mean more to other people as time goes on. There's a story behind this. I happen to have a camera with me. It's an old junky camera. It was a Yashica Mat 124. And I had that in my camera, the van, and we were visiting my wife's uncle, who this is. And he looked so cool sitting there. So I just got the camera, I put it on a tripod, took the picture, and that was it. So So that then started the process of photographing all the other brothers and sisters in the family, all of those that were, like I say, all the siblings. So this is what it ended up to be. So I photographed all of them, and over the years, and with the last one being this last year. So it became a collection. We put that in a wall portrait. This is a John Hartman quick mat. It's a great product. And so that's now all of the remaining brothers and sisters have that. So that's another untapped market, I think, to photograph all the siblings that are remaining. Some of these are no longer with us. 4 of these people are gone. But that becomes more and more valuable as time goes on. Okay, and while we're talking about untapped market, we were just visiting some relatives down in Georgia, and this is a little girl. I said, "Oh, you got to let me photograph you with that hair, and so she said, "Well, okay, but I want you to photograph me with my guinea pig too." Okay, fine. Well, so we did the snapshot, but this is the portrait, one of the portraits that we did during the session, and so I think the point here is that kids are being photographed. Everyone's being photographed. Thousands of pictures all the time, every day. It's become a throwaway commodity. But I think what's being lost is a quality portrait that really builds the self-esteem of the person. And so when we do this and put this on the wall, what does that tell that kid? It tells them that they're worthy and valuable. And so I think to have a beautiful wall portrait of your child on the wall is just still very important. And we're kind of losing that because of the quantity. We're losing the quality and just going for the quantity of the snapshots. So I think we really need to get back to that and somehow reach the parents that you need to have me photograph your child and have something special that'll be an heirloom more so than what's on your cell phone.
Well, I think I've been told, the idea of the temporary photograph, the quick fix photograph, is really short-lived. And I think what I have seen is when I show someone something like this, which is, again, I'm from the same school that you're from in terms of photography. When I show someone something like this, the parents just swoon. Okay, so they want it. It's just a matter of finding what their pain point is, and to let them know that that you have something that can fix that they can have it, that it's doable, and then give them options. And one of the things about that is in marketing, like the words that you use are beautiful marketing words. So the thing that I see just needs to be put together. Rather than being just a picture, we have to create an offer which may contain different elements of the experience, so that the parents are just going to absolutely have no choice but to say yes. So that's the next level, I think, in photography. What we have to do is we have to change the way that we're exposing people and selling, and I hate to use the word selling, making people want these things, because you're competing with the instant gratification. And when we create a package, which is something, maybe the experience, it might be the frame, it might be, throwing in a bunch of other things that will make this so that because they want this. The parents want this. 50% of the parents want this. Okay. And they want it today because they realize, the more mature parents anyways, realize that this stuff is going. My students realize this is going. The instant gratification is so short-lived. They go back to show their friends what their kid looked like when they were 6 months old. They can't find the picture. It's in their phone somewhere. So they really are by connecting with those pain points, I think we can get it back. But it's just learning how to do it, which is what I'm really focused on. But I totally think that you nailed it on just about everything. Okay. I mean, I don't use as much software as you do. I guess I'm more, probably a little more Photoshop friendly, because I use it at a fairly heavy depth, but I am very resistant to making Barbie and Ken dolls, if you know what I mean. I want people to look like themselves. Okay. But at the same time, I feel like you've nailed it. I totally agree with you on everything that you've said. So Fuzzy, I know that you have. Can you show us what you
Sure.
have? What you have to show us? For
Yeah, I just have. Yeah, I do have products. And Marcia asked me about this if I had anything to sell, and I wasn't planning to, but as long as she asked, yes, I do have some things here. We have something that I call a Fuzzy Logic. It's a book. It's a PDF book that is about 220 pages or so of stuff. Whatever is on paper, whatever can be, whatever is can be written. That's what's in this book. It's not so much a lighting or photography book. It's more about lighting equipment, diagrams, paperwork, lots of opinions. I do have, and I think opinions are important also because they help either solidify our own or make us question our own. And I think so that's helpful because sometimes the things we do are goofy, and it's only because of inertia that we do it, or what's the word for inbreeding? But anyway, we see each other do it, and we think that, well, that's what we should do, but does it make sense? You know, and so sometimes it's best to step back and look from afar and say, why are we doing this? You know, why are we? I'm going to anger people here, but why are we dressing an entire family of 30 people in the same uniform? I mean, we're not photographing the Osmonds here. We're photographing people who have individual personalities. And while we want things to match and look good in the scene, we don't want them to be identical. I mean, we're not, you know, my point is that opinions are valuable. So anyway, so that's what the Fuzzy Logic book is. And then I do have a Go Home program, which is, well, it's well over 4,000 slides. It's about 4,500 slides, teaching slides with my voiceover along with each. But it basically shows befores and afters and the pullbacks and behind the scenes photographs and all kinds of things that teach everything I know about senior photography. This is primarily about high school senior photography, but only because they are patient enough that they'll hold still for these things. But it can be applied to kids, pets, families, anything, any people photographs whatsoever. But that's basically what that is. And that's all I have.
Okay, so how do people get in touch with this?
Oh, good. Thank you for asking. You can go to duenkel.com. That's my website. And then there'll be a section that says, I don't know if it's for photographers or professionals, or there's one of the drop-down links that has both of those products on. One is a download. The Fuzzy Logic is a download. The Go Home program is a USB drive that I have to mail because it's huge. It's like 8 or 9 gigabytes, and that would just take too long to download. So so I have that available as a USB drive. So you order it through the website, but then we actually mail the product to you.
There we are. We're both on the same screen here. Thank you so much.
Okay.
This has been amazing. And I want to thank everybody for staying with us. This has been a very informative, very, very exciting for me. Justification for a lot of my stuff too. We'll be in touch. What I'd like you to do is if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below, or to reach out to me at marciadolgin.com, or check me in my Facebook group at Marcia Dolgin Find Images or Camera Control Mastery. So those are the ways to reach me, and I'll also put Fuzzy's contact information there if you want to for his website, and you can go from there. Thank you very much, and I'll talk with you soon.